User and Gia, were you able to add all the links, or do you need a bit more time?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so then I'll continue. Oh, and just so you know, the session's being recorded, so just when you unmute yourself, then there will be some of your audio could be recorded. Okay, so then we're moving on to CSS. So what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's a style sheet language that's used to separate content, which is HTML, from the presentation. So like the design is done by CSS. CSS files are linked to your HTML file. CSS uses these symbols, the curly bracket, the colon, and the semicolon. And you can see at the keyboard at the bottom, that's where they're located. So let's look at some of the syntax and terminology. Selectors determine which HTML elements to apply the styles to. So you can see in the bottom, the selector is the first one at the top. Declarations are the style rules themselves. So the property and value is the declaration. Properties determine the type of style to be applied, such as color, and values are specific to each property, such as red for the color. So it follows this format. You can see on the left side, there's a selector, a property, and a value, and then a semicolon to end the statement, and then a closing bracket. On the right side, you have H1 is your selector, and then you have the color, which is your property. You're setting red as the value for color, and then a closing bracket. So then you can also have multiple declarations. Multiple declarations can be added to one selector. Each declaration must be ended with a semicolon and should be written on a separate line for legibility. So you can see here we have H2 as the selector. So that means any H2 elements that you have on your HTML page will get these styles. So the color will be black, the background color will be green, and the font size will be 50 pixels. So linking to your HTML file. When you're writing CSS for an HTML page, you need to link the two files. Glitch already links the files for you. If you look at the top of your HTML file, you will see this line, which is link, and then rel style sheet, and then href style CSS. So that's the location in the Glitch project. And this tells the web browser that the file at this location is the style sheet to apply to this HTML page. So if you have a multiple page website, then you'll have different HTML pages, and then you will link the different CSS files to each page. So adding styles. The starter CSS file Glitch provides already has styles on the body and the h1 tags. So let's try changing the color of the h1 tag. If you go on your Glitch project right now, and then you look at the left side, you'll see a .css file, and you can edit the content that's there. So you can see from the example, the starter CSS had H1 with the color using that hex code. And then on the right side, I changed the color to orange. So I'll give you a minute now to do that, and then just send in the chat when you're done, or unmute yourself and say you're done. Were you all able to find the CSS file and change the color? Yusra and Sierra? Okay, so then we'll continue. So in CSS, there's 3 ways to add colors. You can use keywords, which are actual color names like red, green, blue, pink, papaya whip, or pale goldenrod. Yes, those are all real color keywords. You could also use red, green, blue, which uses 3 numerical values between 0 and 225. So similar to how you would have a color selector where you would move it around to black or white side, representing red, green, and blue. And hex codes are a number sign followed by 6 characters, which can be from 0 to 9 or from 8 to F. So these colors here are all the same color, and you can see at the top, this is a CSS comment. You start with a / and an asterisk, and then you end with an asterisk and a /. So you can see here on this paragraph selector, then they've changed the background to Firebrick. The background is also Firebrick, but written in red, green, blue form. And then the background is using the hex code, which is also the hex code for Firebrick. So here's some resources that can help you find the keywords, red, green, blue values, and hex codes for colors. And I am just going to copy and paste this and then send it in the chat for you guys. So you could copy and paste that and save it somewhere, or you can just go visit those websites, and those will be useful when you need to select the colors for your CSS. So now we're going to talk about web-safe fonts. Web-safe fonts are pre-installed fonts. Not all operating systems have the same default fonts, so you use something called a font stack to provide fallback options. So this stack should go from the most specific to the least specific using the property font family. So this is how you can change the fonts that are on your website. So you can see the example. We use the font family property, and then we've got Helvetica, and then Arial and sans serif. So if you open up a website on your computer and your computer doesn't have Helvetica for whatever reason, it's going to go to Arial. But then if it also doesn't have Arial available, it's going to go to sans serif. And then it'll just keep going down the list until it gets to the whichever one that it can display. So you can also use sites like CSS Font Stack and W3 Schools to help you figure out the optimal stack for your chosen font. You can also adjust the font weight to make your text thinner or thicker. And I'm going to send these two links in the chat as well. So those will be useful later when you need to make your own font stack. Okay. Another option for fonts is to directly embed the CSS fonts into your HTML. You can do this with sites like Google Fonts, which will provide you an embed link. So you can visit Google Fonts and try adding one to your project after we watch this tutorial, if the page loads. Alright, so I'm going to try using Google Fonts to add a font to my website. So let's choose one that looks different from ones I already have. We'll go with Rowdies. So you're going to choose this button right on the right that says select this style. You can customize the font size, as well as you can put your own preview text to see what other characters look like if you don't like the sample one. There's a sample of all the different glyphs, as well as information about who made the font. So I'm set it to font size 24, and here is the style that I've selected. So it shows up in this bar on the right. So what I can do is click this tab called Embed. Then I'm going to copy this. So you could right click and hit copy, or you could just Control C or whatever the shortcut is on your computer. And I'm going to go to my index.html file. And here is what's called the head of the website. So before where my CSS is linked, my CSS file is linked to my HTML file, I'm going to insert this embed link. You can see now this is the link to the CSS file for that specific font. Now we're going to go back to the Google Fonts page, and you can see the CSS rules to specify families. So this is the text you're going to copy and put into your CSS page. So I'm going to do this for the body text. So you can see here there's a default font family that Glitch set up for you. So I'm just going to replace it. So now it should be for Rowdies. And if I check my website, now you can see that font has been applied to all of the body text on my website. So now you've seen the tutorial, then you can try adding it to your own website, and if you need any help, then you can send it in the chat or unmute yourself and I can try and help you. So I'll give, I guess, 5 minutes for you to find a font you like, customize it, and then make sure you add it to both your HTML and CSS file. And then same thing, once you're finished, just send it in the chat or unmute yourself so that I know we can move on. No problem. Okay, were all of you able to add the Google fonts to your website? Or do you need some more time? Okay, and then Yusra and Sierra, are you also? Okay, so we'll move on now. If you're finished, like before the time is up, you can just send it in the chat, and then that way I know when we can just move on so you're not waiting. Okay, so then we'll talk about inheritance and specificity. So CSS styles can also be inherited from a parent to child element. Recall the family tree structure that HTML elements follow. So if you've got body, then it's the parent of H1 and the paragraph. We have H1 is will display my website. It's the child of body and a sibling of paragraph. And then we have this paragraph, which is a child of body and a sibling of H1. CSS properties in the body selector are inherited by the child elements, which would be H1 and the paragraph. And then a more specific selector will override the inherited values. So if we have our CSS, we have the body selector, and we set color. Every single thing in the body is going to have the color with this hex code. But then if we go here and then we also put H1, and we say color to be blue, then that's going to override the inherited style from body. So when you first do body color, then everything in the body, including the H1, is that hex code color. But then when we change H1, now H1's color is blue, but everything else in the body still follows the hex code. You can also target multiple selectors at the same time by separating them with commas. So if I want H1, H2, and H3 all to use the font family bad script and then cursive, then you can select all three at the same time, so you don't have to write it 3 times to have that font family. So adding fonts and backgrounds. Let's try adding 2 fonts to your website. You've already tried doing the Google Fonts, so you can try making your own font stack. And then you can also add a background image to your web page using background color or background image. Try changing the font color of your elements and try changing the font style of different elements. So here's some example text of how to use the different CSS properties that were listed in the exercise. And if you need any help, same thing, just send a message or unmute yourself. And when you're finished, then just send that you're done so I know we can move on. And I'll give 7 minutes. If you're done before that, then just send it in the chat so that we can move on. Yusra and Gia, do you still need a bit more time to work on it? Okay, so then we'll continue. So now we'll talk about class selectors. So class names can also be used as selectors to apply specific styles to different instances of the same element, or to apply the same styles to multiple elements with the same class name. So here's two ways to use CSS selectors. So you can have a class name selector, which is shown by putting a period in front of it and then writing the class name, and then you can set any properties. And then you also have your element selectors, which is the one you've already used, where you set your whole section to have the blue background. You can also use comments in CSS. They must be surrounded by a forward slash and an asterisk. Similar to how HTML uses opening and closing tags, to open a CSS comment, you use a forward slash and then an asterisk, and to close a CSS comment, you use an asterisk and then a forward slash. Comments can be as many lines long as you want, as long as all of the comment text is within the opening and closing tags. So you could have a one-line CSS comment, or you could have many, many lines of CSS comments. So then for background colors, different colors or backgrounds are often used to separate different sections of a web page. Try making your header or footer a different background color from the rest of your web page, and then try changing the background of just one of your sections. You can also change the color of the text for legibility on your new background. So I'll give 2 minutes for that, and then same thing, just as soon as you're finished, then just send it in the chat. Okay, are all of you finished, or do you still need a bit more time? Okay, so we'll keep going now. So that's what my website looked like after I changed some of the backgrounds and the colors. Okay, so then now link customization. The color of a link will not change when you change the color of the rest of the text because it's a separate element. So to change the link colors, you must apply the styles to the anchor tag. Try changing the color of the links on your web page. So just add the anchor selector to your CSS and change the color. And then you can check on your show view whether that was applied or not. So I'll do another minute. So I don't think you need a lot of time to do this, so I'll just move on as soon as a minute's passed, or if it's even faster than that, then we'll just go quicker if you send in the chat. Okay, so moving on now. Oh, was that actually it? Well, I guess we went faster. I'll just go into tomorrow's HTML stuff then. Yeah, that's okay. Would you guys rather we go ahead to tomorrow's stuff, or do you want to play around a bit more with the CSS? Okay, so then you can just play around with the stuff that we did today, and then if you want any help or you're not sure how to change something, then I can help you with it.